Welcome to the Indianapolis 8 Hours powered by AWS. While the rumble of engines is the perfect soundtrack for us, we're ready to go inside to the ROG Arena. Yesterday, we welcomed SRO Esports to America with the SRO ROG Invitational and this pro race. It was crazy, chaotic, but through the smoke on lap number 1 saw Devin Anderson in his tech sport car rise to the top and take the victory and the trophies as well. With our participants yesterday now out on the real track, we break out sim racing professionals inside the ROG Arena. Drivers have traveled from around the world as we get set for the second part of your SRO Esports ROG Invitational. Well, hello everyone and welcome inside to the ROG Arena. Whether you're inside here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway or watching on GT World or the SRO Twitch and Facebook. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, delighted to be here for yet another great race alongside Austin Belke with Mike Yao behind the scenes controlling all the action. The ROG Arena has been electric today. I've talked to so many people excited about what esports coming to SRO America means, and today now for an hour we get sim racing professionals from around the world out on track, Austin.
It's just awesome to be here. I mean, this facility is electric. You talk about the history here, the prestige, the honor it is to race here or even be here in real life, much less to compete for these drivers. They automatically get to say now they've driven a race around Indianapolis Motor Speedway at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That's just awesome and bragging rights in and of itself.
Well, for the last 2 years, the Fanatic Arena has followed SRO around Europe, but for the first time we bring it stateside. Let's talk more about the ROG Arena by talking with DJ Clark.
Welcome to the Esports Pavilion live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the SRO Esports ROG Invitational presented by ASUS. This is a first of its kind esports activation event here in North America, building on the model that has been done overseas in Europe for many, many times. But what we are doing here today is we have a fleet of simulators put together to bring some of the best sim racers and real life racers to compete against each other live here in an event. Now we've got some of the best products in the world by our sponsors Fanatec and ASUS, so let's bring you over, let's show you what this rig is, because this is some really cool stuff. For starters, you pop right in here in a Rentec V2 cockpit, all absolutely great aluminum products, really, really sturdy. Then from there, you've got a Podium wheelbase DD2 with a Fanatec GT World Challenge steering wheel here to give you the feel like you're just in the car. Add with that the Club Sport V3 pedals to give you one of the most realistic sensations in the world when it comes to driving. Now, in terms of the electronic gear we have an ROG Strix ultra-wide monitor and an ROG gaming desktop featuring an Intel i7 CPU with a NVIDIA RTX 3070 graphics card to give you crystal clear accuracy. All of this combines for a simulator experience like nothing else in the world. But let's stop talking about it. Let's take you for a ride.
Been fun to ride around with PA announcer DJ Clark around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Instead, let's ride around with someone who had an eventful day yesterday in our SRO Esports ROG Invitational. Let's ride around with Daniel Morad in the Mercedes AMG Team Craft Bamboo Racing.
All right, guys, here's a lap around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I'm driving the Mercedes Amg Gt3 Evo. Down the long front straight, the historic front straight part of the oval. An AMG up to 5th gear, braking around the 400-meter board. Down to 2nd gear into turn 1. You don't really want to open up all the way because you need to sacrifice a little bit for your entry into turn 2. Turn 3 is a nice sweeping bend into turn 4, which this is the part that's a little bit different to the real life circuit that we're running this weekend. We're not really using that inner loop section. We're going through the chicane. So yeah, just a really, really big patience corner here around the loop. You want to make almost a double apex out of it, so you can set yourself up for a beautiful entry right from the widest point. Now we join back onto the circuit that we're going to be running this weekend. Another long straight, good passing opportunity. And into the brake zone. We're looking for just past the escape road, down to first gear for the rotation, back to second. This is a really interesting complex because you have to sacrifice a little bit through this middle section to keep the car to the left. So you have a really open turn in. You can cut the inside of the curb and open up all the way up onto the curb around the sweeping bend, up back onto the banking actually for a brief moment, into a heavy brake zone. This is closing into the end of the lap. Really tight section, 90-degree corner where you have to bring the car all the way back to the right side, open up, and a very sweeping entry, decreasing radius, and back around the last corner onto the famous Indianapolis banking to complete the lap and take all the glory.
And of course, not just the glory, but winning here at IMS means you drink the milk, you kiss the bricks. It is just a tradition. Great onboard look at this old and new road course. Of course, we use the flip-flop hairpin, as I call it, the old initial sector. But back in 2014, a new final sector was added to this track, and it's tight and technical and twisty.
Yeah, it's really kind of a mixture of the circuit that the F1 cars used to race here at the end of the 90s, the early 2000s, and of course the road course we have today, which has been run by the Indy cars and the NASCAR Cup cars, the times that they've been here in the most recent years. So it's a neat little Frankenstein mixture.
We saw a look there at the drivers, going to be having a look on board with all of them inside this ROG arena. But let's run you down through the starting grid for the second part of this SRO Esports ROG Invitational as sim racers get ready to go racing. It's Gregor Schill in the BS Turner machine that will bring us to the green, adding to the pole positions that he got, rather the victory that he got this season. We'll see what he can do out on track at IMS. Alongside will be Chris Sievert, one of the other main favorites for today's race behind them. Kerstetter and Martino, Audi and BMW, with Josh Staffen, the first of the Hondas, alongside Eric Bordeaux. Adrian Bourdon will line up inside of row number 4 with Thomas Lavoie to his outside, Alu Gobi, as well as someone we saw yesterday, Chris Walsh, jumps from the pro race to the sim race. Outside of the top 10, we find the Bentley of Joseph Kostovich with Clifford and the Lamborghini alongside. Our final row of the grid will not see Pero Carpi jumping into the field, instead replaced at the last minute by Alex Perry, the race engineer and team manager at Fast Track Racing, and the last of our 14 contenders, Ash Vandelay in the Mercedes Amg Gt3. Full pace lap, important because it gives opportunity for drivers to get heat into their tires, especially since it takes a couple of laps for them to get into their operating window. But as we roll here, main thing that we note is it's a nice mix of manufacturers. Yesterday was BMW, Mercedes, and Ferrari. We get to talk about what GT3 racing is all about.
Yeah, it's really cool to see all the mixture of different cars out there, and that is what GT3 is all about. It's a ton of different manufacturers going out there, and they're all super closely comparative throughout the entire lap here. You see a beautiful overhead shot from director-producer Mike Yao here, of course, at the IMS Speedway. Taking a look here at Aiden Bourdon.
He's got some nice little colors on that car. We'll talk more about it as we build through the course of this race. This is where, of course, in the real world, they're going left and right, but we head right into those hairpins, slower section, not really a passing opportunity, but a mistake out of turn 3 may very well set you up. Let's talk about expectations then for today. And let's be real, the expectations weighed heavily on 2. One being Gregor Schill in that BS Turner car, but also Chris Sievert in that Ferrari, who is coming off second in the Ferrari Velis Esports Series. A fantastic run in 2022 for him, and he is definitely some to watch with plenty of experience in SRO.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to speak with Chris Sievert earlier, and he is really feeling good about this race. I think what it's going to come down to between these two front runners, the guy starting on the front row, you got Gregor and Chris, is the one that's the most consistent throughout the run. And I'll tell you what, Chris is probably nervous right now. He doesn't need to do that. Just go out there and have fun. And Gregor Schill, talking to a lot of guys driving the BMW, not very good in qualifying trims. So to see Gregor out there already sitting on pole, usually the BMW races well. I think these guys got a lot in their hands if they think they're going to pass Gregor.
While many of these drivers have competed against one another, it has been virtually in the online world. SRO Esports, of course, has exploded in the last couple of years. Only a couple of drivers have competed in all our GT America races in the Sprint Series over the last 2 years, one of them being Josh Staffen. We'll talk more about the history for these drivers. It's an exciting 60 minutes, and before we get into that start zone and we get going, let's talk about the pit window.
Yeah, the pit window is between 15 minutes and 45 minutes of the race. So these guys have 30 minutes in total to come down pit road and get 1 liter of fuel just to make sure that ACC makes sure the car counts as having taken that mandatory pit stop.
And you will be able to track that on the left side of your screen on the timing tower. This ROG arena has been electric, and when you compete in person, it's different. There's camaraderie, and there's the reality of if there's a turn 1 bust up, you're going to have to deal with it immediately. But we We saw chaos earlier today in the CrowdStrike CXO race. We had turn 1, lap 1 chaos yesterday with the pros in the SRO ROG Invitational. What do our esports drivers have in store for us? It will be the German Gregor Schill, who has traveled to IMS for this event that will bring us to the green as we head towards the yard of bricks and drop the flag for the SRO Esports ROG Invitational. They run themselves down into turn number 1, the heaviest braking zone on the track. It's a good start in the Audi as Kerstetter looks to try and get into second. Sievert getting swarmed to the run to turn 1. Schill dominates though, and onto the anchors. He leads them through the corners. Sievert leads into turn 2 as well. Couple of contacts though, but the top 3 start to break away as the car goes around.
Yeah, I think that was a Lamborghini spinning there. Really hard to tell who that was. It might be Bourdois. We'll have to see though.
I think it's Alu Gobi and our only McLaren in the field, and that's a shame because that McLaren gets very strong as we build through this race. Looking rearward then from this BS Turner machine as into the hairpins they go. Kerstetter's right there as well. But
oh man, Chris got a great launch out of that corner, really hooked the apex well. We'll see what he can do down the back straight.
And even that second part was even better, but this is where the grunt of that front engine BMW starts to build it. Ferrari has plenty of top end grunt, but needs time to get there. And so as they get onto the anchors into the end of the back straightaway, down off the 200 meter box, they find their braking zone. And let's talk about curbs, because we saw through that left-hand 90, big curb you want to avoid, but through these S's, you can maximize the track.
Oh yeah, you can really just run over these curbs and try to help you shortcut the course. Of course, any sort of feat you can take off the lap time, just going to give you more time back, more of an advantage over your competition. We see these cars now heading up out of the Indy Oval.
Martino in third, Staff in fourth, Bourdon fifth to round out the top 5, a bit wide from Gregor Schill, but it's not such an issue because it's really about this corner, setting up to sweep through onto the banking and down the main straight the wrong direction as we'll complete lap number 1 here on a 60-minute race. Gregor Schill will lead from the Ferrari of Chris Sievert, Martino, Staffen, Bourdon, the top 5, but really we are starting to look at a 3-car breakaway, and it's Martino that's here to spoil the party.
Yeah, look at these guys. They're weaving all the way down the front stretch, much more like we see at the Indy 500. All the Indy guys just searching for that draft. You can see a lot of the virtual competitors here doing the exact same thing. And boy, Gregor messed up that second to last corner, but he absolutely nailed the exit onto the front stretch.
And that was so important as well. The gap between third and fourth has grown over a second, so we are starting to see them stretch their legs. And in an hours-long race, we're not necessarily too worried about tires as we look on board with Chris Sievert in that second spot, the number 3 Ferrari, but you do have to be careful how much you load each corner of the car to make sure you're balancing tire wear over the course of the run.
You really do. You know, these cars are going to be turning right a lot more than they're turning left, and what that's going to do is that's going to force the outside tire, in this case, wherever you're turning, going to be the left sides to blister a lot more, and sometimes you got to make sure that the right sides don't start to grain. That's what you're going to do. The hotter the tire, the more it blisters. The cooler tire, the more it's going to grain. So you really have to manage all 4 corners of this car.
There's the 21-year-old that's flown in from Germany that leads them back on towards turns 1 and 2 on the Indianapolis Oval. Schill has, of course, won in this 2022 SRO Mobileye SRO Esports America Sprint Challenge. Behind him, Chris Sievert is a veteran of the game, has only missed 1 of our races in the past 2 years. 2 podiums, 4 top 5s, and consistently inside of the top 10. He is definitely a driver to watch in that Ferrari, and someone as well that says in his commentator's notes to us, he has never done a backflip before. I'm challenging him, if he wins today, to a backflip on the yard of bricks.
Oh yeah, Carl Edwards style, certainly. Maybe we can move a box out there or something for him to help him do a backflip and, you know, do it for the first time. You can see right now Chris has the fastest lap out of any competitor in this race, going a little bit there, getting loose out of turn 1.
Riding on board with the Samantha Tan Racing BMW, and saw a couple of these entries yesterday as well. There is Cam Martino, one of the drivers that also competed last night in what was a crazy, crazy race. You saw part of the drama. Hectic, I think, is another way to describe it. You saw part of that at the very start of this broadcast as turn 1, lap 1, Elvis Rankin bogged down on the start, and it really concertined it up. And I'm very glad that, you know, we had the issue to lap 1, turn 1, but we haven't seen the replay just yet, but it was only 1 car that got mixed up.
Yeah, only 1 car. Unfortunately, it was Elu Gobi. I think she was the only person driving the McLaren. That McLaren, though, talking to everyone in the field, especially Elu, she likes that car a lot. It's really going to come on strong here in the last 10 minutes of this race, so look for her to really jump some positions towards the end. Riding on board here with Chris Walsh as he tries to hunt down the car ahead of him, Kostokovic.
Go back to your point for a sec as well. You said there was a very interesting reason why she chose the McLaren.
Yeah, she really likes the sound. A lot of people say they don't enjoy the sound, but talking to Alou, she loves it. She, in fact, maybe insulted some of the way the other cars sound. She really just digs the McLaren, likes the way it handles, really suits her.
As we watch Chris Walsh shape up for a move to the inside, Gregor Schill is now 1 second clear in that battle for the race lead. So just watch out for a potential breakaway from that zebra as it tries to gallop away. We check in just outside of the top 5. Adrian Bourdon, I think, has slipped to 6th as Kerstetter in the Audi, has gotten in front of him. We didn't see any Audis yesterday. Of course, Audi and the Lamborghini, the only naturally aspirated cars in our race here today, and they do sound the best.
Yeah, riding on board here with Walsh. He's looking to make a move down here to the inside of Kostovic. Thinks better of it, pulls back in line behind him. You can see that's the onboard right now of Chris Walsh. Just to the right there of your screen, you can see he's really focused on this car. He has a lot of practice, though, on the simulator for this race. Like you said, did the pro event yesterday, finished pretty well in that race, got into some scuffles in the middle of it, but, you know, it's just fun is the name of the game here, having that today, too.
So a couple of things from race control that have already come in with only 5 minutes done in this 60-minute sprint. Josh Staffen, a 10-second time penalty for contact on lap 1, turn number 1. Hopefully we can get a replay of what happened there, because it'd be good to be able to try and break that one down. After that, there was the chaos that saw the McLaren go around. Looks as though no further action shaping up from that one as Walsh continues to look forward. And we were chatting with Chris before we just got started here. He's active service member in the Air Force, loves to be competitive in no matter what he does, has raced superbikes, trying to be a Olympic bobsledder in 2022, and has transitioned very nicely using sim racing to launch a real racing career.
Oh yeah, he's doing a really good job out there, and you can see right now he's all over the rear end of the car in front of him, trying to hunt down that Aston if he can. He continues to get closer and further away from it. Really hard to set up a pass here, especially you get really equal cars here. The Aston Martin too, you know, he's got to be really careful, does Josh, to make sure, Joseph, to make sure he doesn't over-rotate that car.
So here we go, replay of the start, and you can already see it was a great start from the Bentley, who shaped to make it 3 wide. Let's see where the Honda makes the contact for Josh Staffen, and there you can see it's into the right rear quarter panel of the Audi, and that's the substitute chaos. And as Alou Gobi tries to turn in towards turn number 2, there's a car to the inside, a couple of bangs of contact, and into the gravel goes that McLaren.
Yeah, you know, that's just a mixture of, Alou knows the car. Oh, we see a pass here on track. That's Chris Walsh getting to the inside of Joseph there.
Nice and tidy. The Aston Martin Vantage drops down to 10th spot as that BMW continues to charge forward. We did see some impressive speed from Walsh yesterday, so not a huge surprise to see him. Of course, wait for the 10-second penalty to shake things up. I'm curious to see exactly how it breaks up. Checking in with the top 3, we're finding gaps of over 1.5 seconds between all of them. Gregor Schill has done a great job to not just drop Martino, but Chris Sievert as well.
Yeah, you know, I had another opportunity to talk to Chris, and he said if he is, you know, on the back of Gregor, you know, there's the dirty air involved. So ideally, you'd like to stay just up on his rear end to make sure you get all the draft, and especially if Gregor makes a very rare mistake for him, Chris can just kind of take advantage, slide right in, take advantage of that, you know, mistake, rare by Gregor.
Gregor, not just a SRO Esports America race winner and the vice champion for 2022, but has had multiple podiums in the SRO Esports Intercontinental GT Challenge, which of course we'll see one more round in 2 weeks' time as we finally get our season wrapped up with the 24 Hours of Spa, the virtual edition. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I have no doubt in the next 2 weeks, our great team at Race Control behind the scenes will have to deal with many BOP complaints from our drivers. There is Alou Gobi, and you see some glasses on.
Yeah, kind of reminiscent there of Dale Earnhardt's big old gargoyles. I asked her about those, and she said at a previous live esports event there were a lot of lasers going into drivers' eyes, and she didn't really like what that was doing, so she kind of took an idea from someone else and used those sunglasses to her effect, and they kind of just go ahead and dampen the whole room. She's also she's used to VR, so coming here you get a lot more of that peripheral vision that is now all of a sudden competitors in a giant room instead of just the entirety of the car. And talking to her too, it's a real disadvantage for her to be here without that VR headset, because usually she can just move her head to look around, and it, you know, works exactly like your eyes would. You get that peripheral. She can kind of view around the A post or A pillar, but in here she has to rely on a button just to be able to rotate her view about that 15 degrees to see on either side of her.
It's the same challenge for every driver. It's an unfamiliar environment in terms of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but these rigs may be slightly different from what they've got as well.
Yeah, looking at Alou, she is just flicking that, you know, the upshift panel and letting go of it. I asked her what she was doing with that earlier because I'd never seen that done before. She says she does that when she's hauling. So right now she's in the zone. She is going really fast. And you can see she's put down some really competitive times, and she's just in the zone getting after it right now.
about 5 seconds back from Kostovic in that Aston Martin V8 Vantage, so we'll see how it tracks. Looking up front, 1.6 now the gap between Gregor Schill and Chris Sievert, who is trying to pick up the tempo and just trying to find a little bit more time. Gregor Schill breaks into the 134s once again. Finally, Chris Sievert able to respond. 200 splits the two of them on that last trip around IMS.
Yeah, you can see, Gregor Schill right now took back that fastest lap from Chris there. And, these two have stayed almost identically close to one another. Once Gregor got that 1.6 second advantage, he's continued to sort of pull away. But these guys are putting in almost identical lap times. I really think, though, at the end of this race, it's all going to come down to who's conserved their tires the best and who decides to take that pit stop. We talked about, too, that mandatory pit stop. And Arjuna, you and I talked about this earlier. It's all going to be about who comes out with the most clean air. Right now, look at the splits between these cars. It's going to take a real strategist to figure out when you have to pit in order to come up, make sure you have clean air, because this field's pretty spread apart from the first car to the last car, and all it takes is one car to ruin your momentum.
One advantage you have is there is only 14 car split around, about 4 kilometers, just about 2.5 miles of this road course, so potentially maybe plenty of gaps to break into, but that is very much what we're tracking. 1.8 now the gap as Schill and Sievert into that final sector. We ride on board from the nose cam. Great view from down low, and you'll see just how raised that curb is on the left-hand side. Talking to some of the drivers, they said one car you want to be in when you're challenging curbs is the Bentley, which just eats them like it's a Sunday lunch.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to talk to Adrien Bourdon, and he said he really liked the Bentley for that reason, its ability to just kind of eat those curbs up, keep on going. You can see right now, this is looking at another driver. He is just getting after this thing right now, still trying to chase down that BMW ahead of him. Kostovic right here, he's getting after it. This is an intense battle. It's really easy to pass a guy or catch him, but it's one thing to pass, we always say. It's another thing, or it's one thing to catch, it's another thing to pass. These two guys just been almost negligible, the difference between the two of them.
That's the saying of the late, great Murray Walker. So these guys fighting for 9th and 10th positions lost a little bit of ground to those in front, so they will be tracking that in a bit of no man's land as the Aston shapes to the inside. The 949 racing car makes better of that one. Still a long way to go with 48 minutes. Slightly longer race, of course, compared to what we had yesterday. See how it shakes up when we get to that mandatory pit stop window. Like Austin was saying earlier, it's just 1 liter of fuel required to put in the car to make sure it counts as your mandatory stop. Slightly different, of course, from how it works in some of our real-world races across of the world where you have driver swaps, but we still make a little bit of strategy play into this one. The gap for the lead grows over 2 seconds, though, and it's not exciting talking about cars that are split by tenths of a second here and there, but it's so intriguing seeing how consistent those drivers are. We check in with the fight for fourth as Staffen and Kerstetter fly their way through the S's.
Yeah, right here you're looking at Ed Kerstetter as he tries to catch up and see if he can pass Josh Staffen. These guys, though, have Adrien Bourdon right behind him. Bourdon's kind of at the end of this train. He's just looking to take advantage here, kind of riding in the weeds, and you saw that kind of move there, that look to the inside from Joseph Kostovic. He's just mostly looking to the inside to see if he gets some clean air on that car, not looking to make a dive, but sometimes you just got to fill up your mirror and try to find your braking zone at, worst case scenario.
GT3 cars have become aerodynamic beasts as the class has evolved, and like you say, dirty air is so important, and you might not think this track has a lot of it, but you'd be surprised. A lot of drivers have described this in the real world as a momentum-based track when I've chatted to them in the past. There's Martino with plenty of separation behind him and in front of him. Don't forget, lurking over the shoulder of Staffen is that 10-second time penalty. It's not just the Audi R8 GT3 Evo 2 that is shaping up to maybe work his way forward into fourth, but in that Bentley, Bourdon is hunting.
Yeah, and these other drivers on track, they're going to realize that he's got that 10-second time penalty, so they're going to know as long as I stay on him, or at least within 10 seconds, I'll be able to overtake him at the end of the race. Of course, he might come down pit road and be able to take that 10 seconds, Stelio, but this is, look at them, they're in the carousel right now. I absolutely love this carousel. You call it the hairpin, the inner loop here, and there's so many different ways to enter and approach that corner. You can kind of go in slow and easy, wrap that thing, or you can go in like we saw their track guide. You kind of dive in there, get the car to turn to the center, put the power down, really just form a V out of the thing.
And I think to some degree that goes to the fact that you got front, mid and rear engine cars here, and you can approach this race course in so many different ways. If you're not sure what we're doing here for this SRO Esports ROG Invitational, we are bringing SRO Esports in person to America for the very first time. We're racing a Assetto Corsa Competizione, the official esports title of the SRO that features a full complement of GT3 and GT4 cars, as well as a couple of extra editions like the Porsche 911 Cup, the BMW M2 CS Racing Cup, Ferrari Challenge Evo, Lamborghini Huracan ST Evo. It's got it all if you want it in terms of sports car racing, and after 2 years of having the Fanatec Esports GT Pro Series travel around Europe and give real-world points to the drivers competing in the virtual world, maybe we can look forward to that in 2023 here on the other side of the ocean.
Yeah, looking here, this is still looking at Joseph Kostovic. You can see, I mean, he's driving the Aston Martin, having the opportunity to talk to Joseph. This thing rotates on the throttle, but unlike some of the other cars where it does rotate on the throttle, it doesn't necessarily do the power slide. So Joseph has to be really careful about putting the power down, because if he does it too fast, too quick, has a little bit more wheel input in the car, he's going to whip that thing right around. And knowing this car too, he's got a lot, max rake on there, lots of wing. And he says he likes the car because sometimes it's hard to crash, but there's a lot of turbo lag too. So, there's ups and downs, pros and cons to each and every one of these cars, and it's really just whatever car you feel the most comfortable with as the race goes on.
The pit window is now open. You can track that at the top of the screen in the game itself. 30 minutes to make a splash and dash, as it were, as we drive into the evening here virtually in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
You can see running on board here, the Ed Ketterson. He's doing a really good job to just stay on, really stay on the back of Josh Staffen right here. And I feel like Josh is holding him up just a little bit right now, trying to find the optimum temperatures and pressures in these tires. I feel like if Ed would be able to get around Josh, he might have something for Cam Martino just up the road, but it's really hard to tell because all these cars behave differently, especially throughout the course of an entire stint. And sometimes, too, it might matter which axle you start to heat up more than the other one of these cars, because some of them do drive differently. Wow, you can see Ed getting some opposite lock there, just trying to wheel this car up and out of the corner.
Talk a little bit about the Mobileye 2022 SRO GT America Sprint, because it was a very interesting championship. Of course, in 2021, we had just one big class, 40-50 GT3 cars around some of the best tracks around the world. This year, we split it into Pro and Silver, and what a fascinating fight we had in that Pro class. 5 races, 5 different winners. Gregor Schill, of course, coming out on top at Silverstone after qualifying in 3rd. Never able to get to the top 7 in qualifying, was able to do that here today, and he's running away at the front. That gap now up to 2.5 seconds as we see an early stop for the McLaren, maybe trying to get some of that damage on the left side of the car fixed up.
Yeah, talking to Alou here, I was asking her what her strategy was before the end of the race. Because she has the opportunity. The McLaren really starts to speed up and go faster as the race goes on. Talking to her, she's really going to come alive in the last 10 minutes. So I asked her, knowing that, how do you kind of orchestrate your race? And she said she wanted to be a little bit more contrarian to what the other drivers are doing to make sure she has that clean air, and she's just going to wait until the end. And look at her. She knows we're talking about her.
Griphacks.com, yes, indeed. And I think crucially, we talked to one of the other drivers who said the McLaren's real struggle is as the tires cool on pit lane, it takes a lap or so before they get back to where you want them to be. So this next outlap is going to be crucial in that McLaren as it tries to fight back. You will see on the timing tower that McLaren is now green. It has satisfied the requirement for the pit stop window, and now will just charge for 42.5 minutes as the 720S rolls back onto track. We ride once again from Ed Kerstetter's Audi R8 GT3 in the 949 Racing number 28. Staffan's actually managed to build a little bit more of a gap now, almost 9/10 of a second at the line, and I really enjoy these two cars look very similar. They're both mid-engine, but when I tried them out before I came here, they both drove very, very differently.
Well, yeah, all these cars drive differently, and speaking to some drivers, that's what they like about these different things. And I want to touch on, too, we saw Lou Gobi go down pit road. Her tires, obviously, they're going to get a little bit cooler, so there's a huge opportunity to gain some time above your competitors by really maximizing that outlap to make sure maybe you do a little bit of weaving down pit road to make sure those tires stay a little warm, but it's super crucial to maximize your in and your outlaps. You can see, looking here at Ashley Kalita, she's in the Mercedes. Talked to her for a little bit before the race. She's just really happy to be here, having a good time.
Someone that we usually see on some of the other sim racing platforms, but communications professional by day, motorsports streamer by night, and I really enjoy this trend that we're seeing, especially in 2022 with sim racing. It's not just about the likes of Gregor Schill, Niels Naujoks, and some of the other top sim racers going as hard as they can, but Ash has got a great community around her, and sometimes it's just about celebrating what we all love, motorsport.
Yeah, especially, when I was talking to Ash earlier today, Ashley, one of the things Ashley told me is the Mercedes is pretty tight to start the run, and sometimes it'll build tight, so she likes to set up the car a little bit loose to make sure it's neutral for the middle of the race, and so I'm not too surprised to see her a little bit off the pace here in the beginning, and as the race goes on, I feel like she's really going to build into a groove here as soon as his tires are now warmed up. She's kind of in a zone, and you can see that immense focus right here, looking at the screen as she throws the anchors out of the car into turn 1.
I think we might have, a little bit
A
wide
little bit,
there.
yeah.
You
Just adventuring.
Commentator's curse. You were hyping her up. Do you think we have a retirement potentially, because it's not Pero Carpi in the BMW in pit lane, but Alex Perry replacing him, the race engineer and team manager for Fast Track Racing. Now 2 laps down, not sure what happened there. Deep
look at
into
Josh
the brakes
Staffen going
goes
wide.
Josh Staffen with that Acura NSX, and Kerstetter had been piling on the pressure, knowing that the penalty was there, and he just had to mind his time. And now he'll take 4th, and Staffen will continue to look in the rearview mirror.
That was classic racing there by Ed Kerstetter. All he had to do was just fill up Josh Staffen's mirror, stay back there long enough, and kind of make sure Josh knew, like, hey, dude, I'm faster than you. If you make a single mistake, a single error, I'm going to come by. And to be honest, Ed was looking. He wasn't even going to let Josh make a mistake. He was just going to take it.
Got another car on pit lane as the Bentley of Adrian Bourdon has dived to pit road. So second car has elected to roll. There is Josh Staffen. Just a reminder as well, Josh, you can blame the lack of disco ball above your head for the speed and maybe some of the issues here today.
Oh, race car drivers, very much, we're creatures of habit, and we're also, we really know, if there's a lucky disco ball above his head, he isn't racing with that here today. Right, he can blame that.
He was telling us before in the commentary info sheet that disco ball and sunglasses requirements for sim racing. It's always interesting, I find, especially when we're in person, to see what different people use. You can see from this camera shot, Josh has got no gloves on, but alongside him, Jonathan Clifford had sim racing gloves on. Some drivers like socks, some drivers like bare feet, some people like to use shoes on the rig. It's all about personal preference.
Yeah, I mean, race car drivers are superstitious at the end of the day, so maybe it's, I didn't use my lucky gloves, right, lucky socks, and sometimes it even boils down to a lucky pair of underwear for these drivers, and it is silly to think about, but it's a lot of race car drivers are superstitious at the end of the day. You can see Ed Kerstitter's already built quite a gap there back to Josh Staffen, and there was a third car in that Bourdois, excuse me. You see Tom Levine. Now we're looking at here at Clifford in the Lamborghini. You can see really getting after it here. Lots of opposite lock there, really just trying to wrangle this Lamborghini around the track. And talking to him earlier, it's tricky. It's really hard to find the balance.
He competed in our silver class in the Mobileye SRO America's GT Sprint Series this year. Which I love because we have the ability to break it up. So, talking to some of those drivers that competed in 2021, one of their main frustrations was when you're in a big pack, you're only 6/10 off, but you're down in 30th spot because of how tight and competitive sim racing can be. When the margins are so tight, we have infinite practice time. It's good to be able to split them up.
Yeah, and speaking of these drivers taking the practice time, these guys have had the opportunity to go out on these sims for the last couple days, get a couple hours each day, but these guys all came here with the setup built from home, the opportunity to go out there where you're most comfortable, get that setup down. Here's a replay, though.
It's going to be into turn 1. It was the Acura versus the Audi on the run, and while Kerstetter had a look, it wasn't really a big commitment, and I think it's just misjudging the braking zone in that 93, sliding wide, and really, he lost all the time just trying to rejoin the track. Not as much grass kicked up as we had in our CrowdStrike CXO race, but good to see another look at that one as the Audi does not elect to come down to pit lane. Because we don't have cars following so tightly, I think we're going to be a little bit more flexible on pit window in that I think most drivers will just go to the end and see what happens.
Yeah, a bulk of the drivers I spoke to earlier, a lot of them, Bourdois, he was kind of on the fence about what he wanted to do. Speaking to Cam Martino, even Chris Walsh, lots of guys, even Tom Levine, they're all kind of like, I don't really know when I'm going to come down pit road. I'll go when I fancy it, when the opportunity hits me. But a lot of these drivers did say they're going to favor pitting at the absolute last second. So we'll have to see what happens. This is riding on board here. You see Eric Bourdois really getting after it in this Porsche machine. He's happy to be here. These guys all from Canada having a really good time being here. A big group of friends that came down, and I think that's the way to do it, a big group of friends, and that's what sim racing builds communities. There's so many friends I've known, even Mike Yao, our director. I met Mike a year ago just by doing, different racing simulators and broadcasts, and, the opportunity to meet him here. It's kind of like I already know him. Never met him in real life, but we're already friends before we meet.
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, the EGT Canada guys have come out in force today, especially even after some of their drivers with work schedules and whatnot unable to compete in our 2022 Esports Series. It's great for them to be able to come and chat and meet the likes of Gregor Schill, like we said, flying in from Germany. And it's not just flying in from Germany for this competition. I was following him around a little bit yesterday. Lots of things going on with the BMW social media team, of course, because BS Competition, BS Turner, hybrid racing between the two of them. And yesterday, Gregor got the opportunity to go sit in the BMW M4 GT3 car, get coached around the layout by Robbie Foley, and they talked about the differences between the virtual and the real car.
Yeah, I mean, Arjuna, you even had the opportunity to go down there, and again, that's the friendships, that's the camaraderie that you're building by using sim racing as a platform. You got to go there in the garage, and you've got a lot of friends at Turner, I understand.
I'm definitely not biased until this race is over, and then I'm back to being biased once again.
Okay, I've seen your tortilla blanket. Come
yes,
on.
no, I'm hiding that as best as we can. Here's another one of our BMWs, though, in the Samantha Tan Racing number 39. Cam Martino sweeps through the opening sector. I do love this livery on the Samantha Tan Racing car. One of my good friends, Tyler Maxson, had the opportunity to join Samantha Tan Racing earlier this year in the 24 Hours of Dubai. Had nothing but good things to say about the team, but also this brand new for 2022 BMW M4 GT3 car. Of course, started life in the virtual world last year, and it has really been a good change to have it in the virtual world. And with BMW's commitment to sim racing, they are pushing as hard as they can.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to talk to Chris Walsh, Cameron Martineau, some of the other BMW drivers like Gregor Schill, and they all kind of agreed, this car has a lot of downforce just right off the bat. It's easy to set up, and it's really consistent. It takes the curbs good. There's some turbo lag there, but again, the qualifying trim is bad. These guys, they do agree, though, that the car is a little bit tight, so they kind of have to keep that in mind when setting up the car and doing all that. Weight transfer, really big deal for these BMW guys, especially talking to Cameron Martineau. He made me, acutely aware that the weight transfer is something, you really have to get over in these cars in order to, thrash them around a racetrack.
And, talking of this BMW, people have always regarded the Bentley as the biggest of the biggest GT3 cars.
It's interesting fact that you brought up.
It's not the longest. The Bentley is not as long as the BMW, which is 20 centimeters longer than a Bentley Continental GT3 car.
Which is astounding because everybody always agrees. They always say the Bentley is the biggest. It's the boat. They call it the boat for a reason. It's like one of those big old cars in the 80s, sort of like a Cadillac. And it's really interesting to know that it's not the biggest car. You can still see a couple cars. And Gregor Schill, our leader, he's going to come up on some lap traffic here. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. And if I were Gregor right now, if I was him, as soon as I caught up to Alou, depending on if she let me by here or the timeliness of that, I'd throw that car down pit road.
Not a bad call, and I am curious how maybe traffic will play as a thought in drivers' minds. To go back to manufacturers, of course, BMW have been big in sim racing for a few years, but it's not just them. Mercedes, earlier this year, customer teams partnering with the likes of Williams Esports, who have run many competitions here in this Assetto Corsa Competizione. We've seen Ferrari. We talked about Chris Sievert just coming off second place in the Ferrari Velis Esports Series, where the winner becomes a Ferrari Esports official driver for a year. Lamborghini hosts the Lamborghini Rio Race, which Jonathan Clifford was part of their finals to find their drivers for the sim racing team. And of course, Porsche has just announced earlier this year their official works team. There's a look at Ash Vandelay in the Mercedes number 7, and I think this is the look at some of the traffic that Gregor Schill is going to have to be dealing with in these next couple of laps.
Yeah, you can see he's got 3 cars. They're all split by about maybe 1 or 2 seconds apiece as he continues to work his way up through the field. A lot of these guys have already had the opportunity to come down pit road. So not only is it just, that lap pace efficiency, but it really does take a long time. You lose a lot of time when you pull off the track and come down pit road. Of course, you stand still for a good couple seconds, but you're also forced to that pit road speed limiter, and that it takes all the wind out of your sails. I mean, these guys, looking at Josh Sievert, when he went down pit road, he had his hands completely off the wheel. Even Alou Gobi, she had her hands completely folded in her lap just waiting for that time to come by. So it really is an eternity to bring this car down pit road.
And it's slow, 50 kilometers an hour or something like that. It feels even worse. I mentioned earlier that we have the fifth and final round, of the SRO Mobileye Intercontinental GT Challenge Esports 2022 coming up in 2 weeks' time. That, of course, the 24 Hours of Spa, the rescheduled 24 Hours of Spa. We will see Gregor Schill in competition. He is 15 points back as part of the BMW Team BS competition, who are chasing down McLaren Veloce GT with Eamon Murphy, of course, George Boothby, and the one James Baldwin, who has proven, I think, this year at Spa why, with SRO embracing esports to the point where drivers in the real world head to the virtual world to get real world points. When James Baldwin landed in Spa as part of the Fanatec Esports GT Pro Series, he put it on pole by a full second and then dominated the race.
Well, it's so interesting to see these real-world guys taking advantage of the simulator more and more as time goes on. Just to give you folks at home another update on the timing and scoring board, it's still Gregor Schill ahead of Chris Sievert. Then you've got Cam Martineau. That's your entire podium there. You've got Ed Kerstetter. Ed's been doing a really good job. He's slowly but surely been reeling in the car ahead of him, of Cameron Martineau. And talking to Ed, he says this car is a little bit tight. It's drivable for him, but it's pretty tight as you come up through the field. This is looking at Tamois Lavoie, doing a really good job to navigate dominate this Porsche around Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Chill's trying to see if he can catch up and pass Joshua Staffen, as Ed Kerstetter did about 15 minutes or so ago. But yeah, Kerstetter continues to look faster and faster. Pretty impressive, the speed he's building as the run goes on.
The Audi is definitely coming alive in these later stages. Last time by, Martino and Kerstetter, again, 300 splits then. We talk about margins, they are fine at the top level of esports. Let's give you a quick rundown of the Mobileye GT World Challenge Esports Championship across of the world, because of course in 2022 it's not just about the America sprint, we've got the Asia and Europe sprints as well, with this new format with the Pro as well as the Silver Cars. That has been very, very fascinating. In Europe, it was the one and only James Baldwin in the McLaren Veloce car that almost cantered his way to the championship, if you will. It was not easy. Darren McCormack, David Tunitza, of course, were pushing him all the way. Don't forget the Mercedes AMG Unicorn of Love car, Tobias Gronewold, always impressive. Then in the Silver Cars, Dominic Blyer, if Triton Racing in the Bentley, won in that one. Surprised that Dominic is classified as a silver. He is one of the most rapid Polish drivers you will find across of the sim racing universe. Then in Asia, and it's slightly changed for this year because drivers from around the world have been competing across of the world as well. So while in the Asia Sprint Series, Dylan Tan in the Mercedes AMG Legions of Racers car walked to the championship along with his teammate right behind him. In the Silver Cars, it was Felipe Bakida in the ROG Porsche that came out on top in what was a very strong season with, I believe it was 4 victories of the 5 rounds. Incredible job from her. And then as we look to 2022 and the America Sprint, it was the influx of Europeans that rose to the front. It was Luke Whitehead that grabbed the championship in front of Gregor Schill for the Pro class, while in the silver, in the GTWR ROG Academy Porsche, Chris Hartfelt. First 2 rounds went swimmingly for him. 3rd round, a bit of disappointment, but able to waltz to the championship, almost 30 points clear at the end. And it's been an exciting year of SRO Esports, and with 1 race still to go, there's still plenty to focus on. But we head into that off-season, and we also head into a time when drivers start to move teams, and teams in sim racing is important because you spend so much time with them. You never really meet them too much. It's all online. I always say you have to find your home.
You really do, and it's about finding the people you gel the most with, sort of ones that, you know, share the same opinions with you in terms of setup or the way they attack races. Looking at Gregor Schill here, been keeping my eye on him. He has made his way around Alu Gobi, so he's been able to put her a lap down, continues to get closer and closer there to Kostovic. Riding on board here, this is looking at Chris Sievert. He is yet to pass Alu Gobi, but he continues to get closer and closer. If I'm Chris, I might start thinking about having a pit. We only have about maybe 13 minutes or so before these guys, have to come down pit road.
It is still a 4-second advantage, and while yes, there are laps here and there where Sievert is able to claw tenths back, when you build up 4 seconds in a 30-minute race in this fashion, when there's no real fighting for the lead, you just drive your lines and run your pace, it's hard to understate just how impressive the drive from Gregor Schill is so far.
Yeah, and speaking of these drivers, you know, when we call this a sprint race, it really well and truly is. You talk about, you know, we had that, CrowdStrike CSO race earlier. That was 15 minutes. That is an ultra sprint. That was how long almost with the qualifying was. But this hour sprint race, these guys do have to look after their tires to make sure they don't wear one axle more than the other. But these guys are absolutely just thrashing these things around the track. This is looking at Cameron Martino driving that BMW. He's an awesome guy. Had many opportunities to talk with him, and he's happy. You know, if you have a single question for Cameron, you know, walk up to him, ask him. All these guys here really friendly, and especially it's interesting to see that all these guys, competitors here, they all get out of their sims at the end of the day, and they're out there talking in the arena, just having a good time.
They all went out for dinner last night as well. I think enjoyed that a lot. Again, it's just a different feeling. There's camaraderie, and yes, there's bragging rights, trophies, and our winner walks away with a Asus ROG monitor and desktop, courtesy of our friends at the Republic of Gamers. But I think they are very much enjoying this opportunity to soak in the environment of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, enjoy the sound of GT3 cars rumbling around for the Indianapolis 8 hours powered by AWS, and just spend a weekend away from home. So, you were right, less than 13 minutes or so to go in that pit window. Like we were saying, with the gaps that we've built up, we are going to see them go just as long as possible and minimize as much time as possible
Yeah, I kind of wasn't sure, what these drivers would do. Talking to some of them, I said, if your tires are going to cool down when you go down pit road, are you going to wait until you come off, turn 12 or something? You notice, like, man, my tires are hot. I am slipping and sliding all over the racetrack. Do you then take that opportunity to come down pit road and you basically get to cool your tires for free? Usually when these guys end up heating up their tires, whether it's the front or the rear axle or all four, you kind of take a step back in terms of pace and you take it a little bit easier going around these corners. This is looking at Adrien Bourdon, one of the most friendly guys around here. I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to Adrien, really just a friendly guy. And of course, he's representing a company he works for in real life out there on the track.
Yeah, very quickly, I just want to say, if you're watching on GT World, I am checking to see who you're rooting for. I saw BS Competition and their driver Angus Fender both in there at one point. Plenty of supporters for Eric Bordeaux, Jonathan Clifford as well, a couple of Alu Gobi fans in our YouTube chat. Do let us know who you're rooting for. We are trying to ignore our race director, Mike Jones, who is popping in there as well. Where we talk about, pit stops. Let's talk about this. Chris Walsh in the Samantha Tan Racing BMW down on pit lane, following the Porsche of Eric Bordeaux. Crucial times with 10 minutes left to go. They will enter plenty of clean air, but it's now about that first outlap, getting the tires back up to temperature, and then just going, as Lewis Hamilton likes to call it, hammer time.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these drivers, too, you have to make sure you practice your in and out lap, mostly the in lap, because there's a lot of time to be gained and lost on your approach to pit road. Big NASCAR fan myself. Kyle Busch gains a lot more time on his competitors just going into and off of pit road than you would think. There's some times where, he pitted lap before, so you have the undercut like you commonly see in F1. Sometimes he'll go ahead and lose the undercut opportunity, but because he just maximizes all the speed going on to and off of pit road, he ends up coming out with an overtake more often than not at the end of the day. Let's just taking another look here at Eric Bourdois, doing a really good job here to navigate that Porsche around these curves. Interesting to see how long these drivers are waiting to come down pit road. Eric has already done so in that Porsche. He just mentioned that. You talk about delivery on that BMW. We had the opportunity to go on the grid walk earlier today and see a lot of these cars in real life, and that was a phenomenal thing.
As Josh Staffen comes into the lane, who I think will serve that 10-second penalty.
He's stationary right now a lot more than these cars. They come into the stall, they go up in the jacks, wait for a second, come back down, and then leave.
So as he rolls, that penalty has been served, so we now know exactly where it's going to shake him up. He will be fighting on track. I did see Nicholas Hillebrand in our GT World chat saying it's very weird to see Josh Staffen without the disco ball above his head.
It is really weird, too. Not even with the sunglasses, too. I'm kind of curious, to see Josh, is he maybe just not attuned to all the light going into his eyes right here. Those pupils obviously kind of dilated right now, pretty small. He's not used to those sunglasses. I was kind of surprised Josh didn't bring a pair of sunglasses to go ahead and throw on in the rig right here.
I've tried driving in a race suit before. I was very sweaty by the time I finished it. I definitely don't want to try the full racing gear, but that is definitely something we should try. Back to Adrien Bourdon in his Romeos by SRO Esports Bentley Continental GT3. Not the only teal, white, and red car in the field, because Chris Sievert as well will have that, as Martino, I think, now works with some lap traffic potentially as they dive down through what is tighter than 90 degrees at turn number 1. It's Gregor Schill, actually, that's getting past Chris Walsh and the other of the Samantha Tan Racing cars. And I'm surprised, to your point, that as Gregor Schill now works his way past, I think, the last bit of traffic that he'll deal with for now, he didn't think about diving to the lane.
Well, some of this, too, it really is a high-speed chess match, because you see Gregor out there. It's a lot easier to pass a car when you're faster than them by a greater margin. So he's a lot better, more apt to pass some of these slower cars that he's lapping just based on pace and pit stops alone, that if he were to pit early and then have to come back through the field and have to pass guys like Bourdon, Clifford, Lavoie, Kerstetter, he's a lot, it's going to be a lot harder for him to pass those guys between 4th and 8th than it is to pass the guys between, 7th and 12th or something. So that's also a factor that's going through his mind, too.
Kerstetter in no man's land, 6 seconds back from Martino, Lavoie, then 8 seconds adrift from him. These are those moments when that mental concentration is so important. 22 minutes left to go in this race, just 7 minutes in the pit stop window. Again, it's just 1 liter of fuel required. We check in with Eric Bourdois, who is the second car to have made the pit cycle complete, and behind him is Josh Staffen. So that's where the 10-second penalty has dropped the Honda.
Yeah, it was interesting, really, to see Eric Bourdois come off that corner. He was really hustling that thing. He dipped that left rear tire in the grass just a little bit, and that's how you know these guys are pushing coming off that last corner, really trying to maximize that straight line speed. And if you're Eric, you have to do that. talking with Eric and some of the other Porsche guys, that car lacks a lot of top speed, so he really has to maximize the opportunities when they come to him to kind of make sure he has all that straight line speed possible. And if you're Joss...
Sievert in pit lane. The Ferrari dives, trying to see what he can do to pressure Gregor Schill with a potential undercut. The Ferrari drops and rolls, and this is the moment we were waiting for.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting here to see what Chris Sievert can do, and I'm also going to be curious to see if Gregor Schill comes back and pits almost immediately, because now these guys are separated. Before, you know, if Gregor had to pass a car, Chris had to pass a car. Right now, it's going to be completely different. So I'll be kind of curious to see right now if Gregor comes back down pit road, because the margin between them is a lot greater right now. It's hard to tell what's going on with your competition. You see Chris right here. I was watching Chris yesterday, even going down the backstretch. This guy took his hands off the wheel. He's really relaxed inside that cockpit.
Chris is a very interesting person. We talked about the competitiveness out of Chris Walsh, who just wants to compete in anything he can. But when it comes to Chris, very smart in, got a degree in physics, math, and German. Played college tennis. Said he almost got a six-pack, so you know, clearly that was the primary motivation to go and to play tennis. But he works as a winery lab technician, also is a tennis coach, and like we said, has been consistently at the front in SRO. Wondered if he got a little bit of moment there as he worked through the hairpin, but the look of concentration on his face indicates no, it's all tidy. And he's actually come out in front of one of our cars still yet to pit. The pace and the relentlessness from Schill and Sievert is quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's really interesting, too, to see Sievert. You see, you know, you mentioned how much he has to kind of flick the wheel back and forth to go ahead and get the car to settle, especially coming off the corners. Talking to Chris, you know, he mentions the Ferrari, obviously, a lot of engine responsiveness. You know, I was talking to some of the other drivers about turbo lag, and Chris said, turbo lag? Ferrari? What's that? I don't know what you're talking about. Is this a problem for you other drivers? So yeah, Chris, a lot of you know, throttle response coming up off the corner, so it's really easy for him to spin up that rear axle, overheat the rear tires, Arjuna.
And of course, don't forget that ABS traction control, it plays such a major part, not just in the real world with these cars, both for the gentleman drivers and the professionals, but here in the sim as well, understanding anti-lock brakes and how you can use it to dive into the braking zone a little bit deeper, a little bit harder. When it comes to getting on the power, how early can you stamp on it and try and roll the momentum, especially coming out of this complex here as they come down through turns 8, 9, and 10, ramping into that final sector. This is so important. Not as important as it used to be, because this corner would run your momentum all the way into turn number 1, it's still very crucial.
Yeah, you know, talking about the, you know, using the advantage, the ABS, using that to your advantage, we had the opportunity to talk with Daniel Morad yesterday, and he had that thing down to a science. He said breaking into turn 1, as soon as you hit that apex, just about a foot or two before, you go ahead and release your foot off the brake just to get that car to rotate. So these drivers are going to have these electronics, that's what they call the ABS, the traction control system, electronics in quotes. You know, they use those to their advantage, and they understand them to such minute details, it is insane.
3 and a bit minutes left to go, and Gregor Schill does indeed come down a little bit early, just guaranteeing him peace of mind that he will satisfy this pit window requirement. Down the lane, Martino inherits the race lead as a result. Herstetter in the Audi also makes his way to pit road as we focus on Gregor Schill in the BS Turner machine, drops and rolls as the German.
Yeah, interesting. It took us so long in this race. You know, you talk about 42 minutes to see our first lead change. That is just the absolute speed and raw pace of Gregor Schill. He's been really just hammering out these laps, doing a great job for his competition. Looking here at Chris Walsh, having to navigate that inner loop, that hairpin, really difficult depending on what line you want to take it, even set your car up for. All the cars handle them differently, and if you have such a different setup in the same car as someone else, you'll have to drive that completely different.
So as Gregor Schill exits pit lane, he obviously will be in front of Sievert with the gap hanging at around 4.5 before the Ferrari dive to the lane. But as Schill rejoins at the apex of turn number 2, we wait for the gap to update, and it's grown to 5.7 seconds. So a good window there for Schill, not just to push when Sievert maybe had some colder tires, but to execute in the lane as well.
Well, we might see that, you know, that gap between these two drivers decrease a little bit because Gregor still has those cold tires. Might take him a little bit to go ahead and get these things back into their optimal window of PSI and temperature range. Talking to these guys, it is extremely narrow, the room within these guys have to work with to make sure that those tires feel optimal. You see Gregor, he's getting a little bit sideways, kind of dipping a tire off into the grass there. You know, that's the difference between what these guys have on absolute, you know, perfect tires. You come out of the pits, they're a little bit cold.
They just cool down because you're going slower. And that's why when we were talking about that McLaren earlier, one of the things that some of the drivers had mentioned is if it wasn't a fixed pit stop window, you just had to make one pit stop.
Right.
They'd come in on the very final lap, one lap to go, so they just satisfy the requirement as little as they could.
Yeah, talking to Luke Gobi, I asked her, I was like, so, if your McLaren really comes on well at the end of the race, why don't you just either pit as soon as the green flag drops, come in the next lap, or come in the very last lap? And she said, well, it really just depends on what you're feeling and your competition too. And today, we do have, it's a little bit more real life like, where, you do have a pit window, because in real life, these cars, it's not just come down pit road for 1 liter of fuel. In real life, this is what it's like. You have a certain window where the car's going to run out of gas if you just keep going and don't stop.
So we get our final takers to pit lane because the pit window closes in 50 seconds and counting. So Martino and Lavoie, the final two, to cycle down the lane, along, of course, with Jonathan Clifford. And now we have a 15-minute sprint to the end in many ways. It's 4.3 between Schill and Sievert at the last timing line. It's going back and forth up to 4.9 in real time. It's all just now going to be about managing the pace of the race. If you are Gregor Schill, Martino rejoins in 3rd position and 7 seconds clear of this gaggle that I think we're going to focus on for a little bit, because as we watch Adrian Bourdon defend from Kerstetter, Lavoie is only a couple of seconds in front.
Yeah, really interesting to see these two cars going after it versus one another. I didn't even think these guys are very close on the track, so to see them come together like this, pretty impressive.
Correct myself. Thomas Lavoie, timing is not updated. He will cycle in behind this battle, which is now therefore for 4th and 5th positions. Of course, trophies for our podium, bragging rights for the winner, as well, of course, as the Asus ROG monitor and desktop, courtesy of our friends at Republics of Gamers.
Yeah, really interesting here to see that Kerstetter and Bourdon have, caught each other. I think Bourdon has made his way around Kerstetter. You see them both now coming up to lap the Mercedes there of Ash. So they're going to have to see, a lot of these times it all depends on, when the lap car lets you by, because then you can have either a compromised entrance or an exit. She's going to do a really nice move here. Just pull over to let both these guys by around the outside. Really nice opportunity there for her to just go ahead and, say, I don't want to have a hand in, which one of you guys gets the advantage, just take it, go around.
But this battle for 4th is definitely the closest one to watch outside of the top 10. Alu Gobi only 1.7 seconds away from Kostovic, so we will watch that one as well with keen intrigue. 14 minutes left to play. A lot of fun with this SRO Esports ROG Invitational. It's always something different when it's in the sim. We get, like you said, you met Mike Gow a year ago, you made friends, and it's built for this. And it's not just drivers in the real world that come to the virtual world. It goes the other way as well. No better example than someone like Lauren Heinrich, 12 years old, out of karting, not enough budget to move forward into professional racing cars. So what does he do? He finds sim racing, he finds BS competition, uses them to become a better driver, to build his profile, and then in 2019, when the opportunity presented itself, he leapt at it with both hands. And in the years that have passed, he has grown bigger, has gotten the results, and last year won the Porsche Junior Shootout to become a Porsche factory driver, using sim racing to find his way there.
Yeah, you see this really tight, intense battle. You see Ed Kerstetter just barely dipping that left rear off the track right there. Feel like his tires have fallen away a little bit. You see him locked into this battle here with Bourdon. These guys really going after it too. And you mentioned that battle, Arjuna, between Gobi, Kostovic, and now Walsh. Those three cars are extremely close together too. So we've got a decent couple battles here out on track, kind of spoiled for choice in terms of which battle we really want to have to be able to follow along with, because to show the viewers, we really only get to the opportunity to kind of focus on one battle at a time.
Don't ask Mike Yao, he'll make sure he shows you all the battles at the same time. Here's the look on board with Bourdon. I had plenty of conversations with him. That big Bentley is going to be so good, I think, at turn 1, because he knows that he can afford to run tight, to use the curve in the way that the Audi simply cannot do. It will be the same thing at the other end of the lap as well when you get to the heavy braking zone into that final sector. The Bentley can use the curb, the Audi will have to be a little bit more tentative. Audi closes in the draft on the run into turn 1, and while he shapes for a move, it's not there for Kerstetter.
Yeah, talking to Ed about the way that Audi handles this, he says it's tight and it's very tail happy because of that. What he means is it's so tight when he enters the corner, he has to put a lot more wheel into that car than he'd like to. So when he does put the throttle down and tries to open it up, if you don't open up the wheel fast enough, that car is going to start to slide that rear end out. It basically creates, you have a tight and then a loose condition because you're so tight. You see these guys having to pretty much navigate that inner carousel here before they go onto that large back straightaway. And, speaking to Bourdon, he really made sure to note that he has a lot of torque in that thing, so he knows he can put the power down really well and has that straight line speed, all the power really with that torque.
5.2-liter V10. We ride from the nose. We enjoy the soundtrack of this Audi R8 LMS Evo 2, the mid-engine car, of course, going up against the front-engine 4-liter V8 twin-turbo of the Bentley Continental GT3. As always, GT3 cars anywhere in the range of 5 to 600 horsepower, depending, of course, on the BOP. And despite these cars, the Audi looks quite svelte when you sit it next to a Bentley. It's quite interesting that they're basically identical in terms of weight.
It really is. It's interesting to see how these different manufacturers kind of pack weight into the car and especially learn to work with the air around the car. These cars, we started out at Indianapolis especially, the cars used to be shaped like bullets, to minimize the air resistance. And then we said, well, maybe I could find a way to work with the air. Then the advantage, the adaptation and invention of wings on the cars to create downforce, not just slip through the air, but kind of use it to your advantage to push the car into the ground, really take advantage of all the possible load and grip from these tires. That really the only thing that connects the car to the racing surface here, all the asphalt, the concrete, whatever, tarmac, whatever you want to call it. These guys, though, continue to be locked in a really tight battle down through the field. That grouping between Walsh, Kostovich, and Gobi continues to get larger and larger every now and again. So this is definitely the tightest battle we have on track here.
Definitely. I think this is where we should expect some fireworks with about 10 minutes to go. Quick history of this Indianapolis Motor Speedway, of course, built back in 1909, the second purpose-built banked oval after a track in England, which I always find quite amusing, but it was the first track named the Speedway. Of course, built initially with packed soil. As speeds increased, issues, of course, developed, and with paving relatively unproven and new technology at the time, the decision was made to bring in 3.2 million 10-pound bricks to line the surface here. Of course, 1930s, we saw tarmac start to replace the bricks. It wasn't until 1961 that the track was repaved, leaving just the yard of bricks that runs from the start-finish line all the way to the pagoda. And you and I have talked about this a couple of times. If you really want a brick, just go hunting through some of the creeks or on the outside of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Yeah, you talk about the pagoda. One of the most picturesque things here about this racetrack, when I first showed up here with Mike Yao, to take a look at that giant pagoda, you see it on television, just how picturesque it is, looking through all the different glass panes they have on the building. It really is a sight to just take in and kind of believe like, wow, like I'm actually here at IMS. Just a phenomenal feeling. You still look here, Adrian Bourdon right now being hounded, absolutely just hounded by Ed Kerstetter behind him. We'll have to see, though, if Ed decides to do another fake out, look to the inside. That move on Josh Staffen he made, that really wasn't even an intention to dive bombing him in there. He kind of just looked to the inside, really trying to see what he could do in terms of putting clean air on that car. Dirty air is certainly a factor in these things. You can see, you have the advantage of the draft down the straightaway. It works the same way as you start to break into a corner, and sometimes even that dirty air can take away some of the braking ability of these cars.
We did mention earlier, of course, aerodynamic beasts, these GT3 cars. You very much have to get a handle on them, and you want to set them up as well. It's not a fixed setup competition, so drivers have been able to submit setups and then make adjustments over the last couple of days, so they will have been finding time here and there. One of our drivers yesterday in the pro race, Elvis Rankin, was mentioning that a couple of setup clicks, he found about half a second in lap time.
What really is impressive, just the kind of minute things you can do to gain absolute heaps of time as the race goes on. You think you think you have a setup nailed down, you feel like you like the handling of it, but it could just be better. It's just the minute things you can do to gain a ton of speed. Sometimes you can work on a setup for 5 hours at a time. I've done it myself. You sit there, you go, how do I get this thing to go faster or handle how I want to in a certain corner? And sometimes at a large road course like this, you can perfect turns 1 and 2, but then all of a sudden, you're absolutely really just you're plowing tight coming up off the corner down to the front straightaway.
Gap for the lead as we check in with Gregor Schill is up to 4.1 seconds. So Sievert has been able to close it slightly after the pit stop window, but with 7.5 minutes to play as Schill cuts a little bit too much on the grass there, using the flat curbs through the carousel, as Austin likes to call it. It's now below 4 seconds. I wonder if the BMW has maybe just been a little bit more weighty on the tires than the Ferrari, which is a little bit more nimble, agile, and maybe still has something to play with 7 minutes to go.
Well, it's interesting, too, because talking to all the BMW guys, they mentioned that this car is super consistent throughout the entirety of a run. So to see Gregor falling off this much, I'm not quite sure what's going on in that car. It'd be really interesting once we get out of this race, if we have the opportunity to talk to him, just to kind of ask him what he was feeling like at this point. And, of course, too, it could just be that right now, Chris Sievert is just a little bit faster as they go through these corners. Maybe Chris has found something, speed in that car. Maybe he's doing something a little bit different on the racetrack.
we jump on board with Josh Staffen in his Honda NSX, 9/10 back from Eric Bordeaux. I've been checking, by the way, that battle that we were kind of tracking with Alu Gobi and some of the others, but I'm not sure what happened there. It is very much splintered up, and we aren't watching anything too hard. This is a great camera shot. You see very much driver's perspective, what they're seeing, the input on the wheels, and crucially the dance on the pedals that's going on as they manage the momentum.
Yeah, that incident with the Lou, I saw briefly a yellow bar come up next to her name, so I feel like she might have gone for just a little bit of a spin, some sort of adventure there. That's why you see that now. That was basically a 12 or 13 second disadvantage from her to Kostovich just ahead. But before that, I mean, she was really coming alive here in the later moments of this race. But if you're Josh Staffen, after the earlier part of this race, that 10-second penalty, you've got to be seeing red right now.
So let's ride on board with Josh for a lap here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, because we've got a great vantage point from him, riding from the shoulder. It's a very heavy braking zone in towards turn number 1, braking at just over 260 kilometers an hour at the 400-meter board. You're down to 90 at the apex. Get close to the curb, try and avoid it, but then as you sweep through turn 2, use the curb on both sides to carry the momentum and run yourself down in towards turn number 4. So hard to spot your braking here, but braking from 170 down to 110. This is where you set up on the left-hand side, flick it through at full commitment, and dive into the first of the hairpins. We saw, like Austin was saying, multiple lines being taken here. A couple of these drivers electing to go a little bit tighter, but really you're setting up for this one, powering off and using the curb to sweep out wide, almost to the grass, and get that momentum pointed on the run down in towards turn number 8. You're braking hard here, but you're not at 260 kilometers an hour. It's down to about 220 as you brake onto the anchors at 200 meters. Again, another big curve, but really you need to get to the left here. Fly through the first part of the S's. This used to be a 90. It's been opened up a little bit more, so you can get to the left and carry the momentum, and again, use all the track on offer. Staffen will take a little bit of the grass. That's a little bit more than you want to do, but into this new final sector added back in 2014. One final stamp onto the brakes as you really try and slow it down. Another big curve on the inside, and once again it's all about setting up, not for the next corner, the one after that, because if you compromise here and go a little too wide, you might have to lift off coming through turn 14 and building that momentum all the way back down the main straightaway to power to the start finish line. It's a great lap here at IMS. Some of the old layout, some of the new layout as well, and with 4 minutes left to go, the gap for the lead is down to 3.6 seconds, but we're into those closing stages. Gregor Schill is still in control.
Yeah, Chris Sievert's been doing a really good job to make some inroads on, oh, this is another replay here.
Oh, and this is maybe going to involve lap traffic potentially, because that's Ash Vandelay in the Mercedes trying to stay well and truly out of the way, then gets into the marbles and maybe compromises under braking. Oh no, self-inflicted mistake. I think Gobi hit the wall before getting onto the brakes.
I think she might have known, too, she was not going to make that corner, so she just decided to stop there and make sure that she didn't compromise Ash. Ash is very nice to her to kind of let her through. I'm sure Allie was thinking about that, just say that, you know, I made a mistake there. I appreciate you letting me by, but, you know, you go ahead and take that back for now. There's still, we have this battle between Ed Kerstetter and Adrian Bourdon just ahead of them. These guys have been really just locked in a battle for, what, the last 20 minutes of this race. Really interesting stuff. I want to touch on that. You know, you saw Josh Staffen. He didn't really cut that last part of the backstretch chicanes, those S's, as much as he wanted. That forced him out wide. So you really do have to do, you know, your best job to kind of cut that corner. You see a lot of rubber inside of the, you know, the runoff there. It's there for a reason. Guys are using that all day long.
So as we look at this battle then for fourth with, I think, 2 laps to go, it will be defensive from the Bentley, who's feeling maybe a little bit of the pressure from behind. Riding on the cockpit of Ed Kerstetter on the run to turn 1. He'll sweep all the way to the left and try and pinch the Bentley down to the curb on the inside, but the Bentley can handle it. He'll try and push the Audi out wide, but through turn number 2, inside to Audi. The Bentley takes it back, though, into turn number 3. Great side-by-side fighting, but the Bentley will control to turn 4.
Yeah, door to door. Kerstetter really had to make that move done if he wanted to. You know, he had the outside. It gives him a lot of momentum. Then had the inside for turn 2. He needed to get it done. That was going to be a crucial corner for him. He's going to have to see what he can do to kind of set up and make another move here on Bourdon before the end of this race, but he's only got 2 minutes before this thing finishes up, so he's got to do it and be fast about it. You really just need high percentage moves from here on out. You can't, you know, make a half attempt at this.
We may get an extra lap. We may get 2 laps after this is what I'm saying. It depends on where Gregor Schill is. A half-hearted look from Kerstetter will not commit. What a great camera shot from the back of the Bentley. Beauty of sim racing is we can put cameras everywhere. It benefits our production team. It benefits race control as well. So as Gregor Schill comes across the line now, 1 minute and 40 seconds is left. I think we're getting an extra lap to end this one.
Yeah, you know, if Gregor wanted to, he probably could have checked up about a second or two to make sure this was the final lap, but he didn't, so he gives us more opportunity to race, more opportunity to talk about these lines. And we just mentioned, too, you know, the camaraderie between these drivers, not teammates, but you saw just how much room they gave each other going into turn one. There was a lot of sportsmanship there. These guys made sure to not door bang each other, and you saw them have a mixture of inside, then outside, then inside again, and I'm loving this action here between Adrian and Ed.
One thing I'll point out as well as we start to get into the very final stage of this one is plenty of our drivers aren't just competitors but have experienced what it's like to welcome people to sim racing and to esports as well, much in the same way that we're doing here inside the ROG arena with SRO Esports landing on this side of the ocean. 9-for-9 racing, the likes of Joseph Kostovic have helped that build from 2020 to get hundreds of drivers into this race. Into league racing in North America, and we've seen that as well with the likes of Josh Staffen helping behind the scenes with the GT World Challenge America Esports seasons, working alongside SRO America.
Boy, going through this inner loop here, Ed Kerstetter is all over the place. I think he's really upset the rear axle. He made sure to warn me about that yesterday, this car having that tight in, loose off condition because you got so much wheel into this car.
We will get one more lap. It is confirmed from our team at Race Control. So as Gregor Schill runs his way closer and closer to starting the final trip around the Brickyard, it's still this battle for fourth which we focus on. There is the German powering out of turn 14, and with mere seconds on the clock, Gregor Schill extends this race one lap longer than I think anyone would have wanted.
Yeah, putting on an absolute clinic here as we come down to this. Chris Seifert, he's done a really good job to make some inroads into that lead. You see it was about 4 seconds. Now it's 3.4. In the last couple minutes, he's gained about 6/10. But if you're Gregor Schill, all you've had to do for about the last 20 minutes, kind of just nurse this thing. You know, just make sure to bring it home. Don't make any unforced errors. But boy, Ed Kerstetter, his car continues just to dance around all over the throttle. These cars anymore, Arjuna, I don't think they're handling very well.
The tires have been pushed to the ragged edge, and now just 2.5 miles left to survive if you are those Pirelli tires. I don't think he's close enough into turn one, surely. That would be a Daniel Ricciardo level of send, and indeed the Audi tucks in and maybe now thinks about the final opportunity into turn 9 because they are running out of time.
Yeah, if he wanted to get that move done right there, he really would have had to channel either Daniel Ricciardo or Ricky Taylor, maybe JPM, you know, the absolute last of the late breakers. Oh, look out, that was Adrian Bourdais. He went a little bit wide there coming out of turn 4.
Greedy on the throttle, just trying to get too much from the car. Now still separated by about half a second as they'll sweep their way out of turn 7. And this is where they will be greedy with the throttle, and they have got to be. Gregor Schill coming through the final sector and into that final heavy braking zone. What a display it's been from the German. About 10 hours from home, flew here to win, and win he has done. After the victory at Silverstone earlier this year in the Mobileye GT World Challenge America's SRO Esports Series, Gregor Schill lands at the Brickyard and conquers to win the SRO Esports ROG Invitational in the BS Turner number 86.
Look at him, happy to be here. Look at the smile. That's about the first time I've seen him smile that big all weekend. We talked to him at length the past 2 days, so that's really interesting to see. You see Chris Seifert just behind him again, second place in a row for him. Second place that is. Now we see this battle here between 4th and 5th. Adrian Bourdais looks like he's going to finish just ahead here of Ed Kerstetter. These guys put on just an awesome battle the last couple laps. Shows a lot of the respect given.
That's the word, respect shown between the two. Kerstetter not willing to force the issue, and they are going to enjoy this one. We still got a while for the rest of the cars to come across the line, so we will just hold a minute before we get ready for our podium ceremonies. Great day for Gregor Schill. You're right, it is one of the first times we've seen him smile, even after sitting in the BMW M4 GT3 car. He walks away not just with the trophy and the bragging rights, but of course an Asus ROG monitor and desktop as well. Here is Joseph Kostovic in the Aston Martin. Will end up finishing down in 10th position behind Chris Walsh. We've had so much fun with this SRO Esports ROG Invitational. I mean, yesterday was amazing. Yes, we had plenty of chaos, and while today was calmer, there is a little bit more tension when it comes to the sim drivers, because you know they are pushing to the limit.
Oh yeah, well these guys are just more adept, they're more used and comfortable, you know, with this racing simulator. So to see a lot more calmness out of this race, but still have a really close competition, I'm not too surprised. You talk about the finishing positions for the rest of the field. You got Thomas Lavoie coming home in 6th position. Eric Bourdois coming home in 7th. Joshua Staffen, he had that 10-second penalty after some turn 1, lap 1 contact ahead of him, puts that Acura back there. Unfortunately for him, 8th position was the best he could finish. He was feeling pretty confident about himself coming into this race. You see Arjuna out there. The rest of your finishing order, though, you got Chris Walsh in 9th. Joseph Kostovich rounds out the top 10. Elu Gobi finishes outside the top 10. Best you can do with that McLaren is to bring it home in 11th position. You got Clifford in 12th, and instead of Pericarpi, we actually had a newcomer, Alex Perry, at the absolute last second comes in to fill in for him. And then, of course, we have the one and only Ash in her Mercedes coming home in 14th. But anyway, so I think we're now going to be able to join Arjuna live in the ROG Arena.
Well, what a weekend this has been, and we still have plenty of time in the Indianapolis 8 hours powered by AWS, but we're ready for our podium ceremony here for the second part of the SRO ROG Invitational, and we'll do it in reverse order. We'll start with Cam Martino in that Samantha Town racing car that in second day back here in the ROG Arena puts it on third. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much.
For Chris Sievert, it is second place here today, and while he pushed to the very end, his Ferrari just maybe didn't have the pace, but a great result for Chris. Congratulations. And flying from Germany, there is some expectations that maybe you have. For Gregor Schill, he rose to the occasion and wins the SRO Esports ROG Invitational. I've got too many things in my hands. Let's have a round of applause for our podium. And we'll get the drivers out in front to celebrate this moment. SRO Esports has landed in America, and what fun it is. We'll chat with all of our podium. We'll go in reverse order. We'll talk with you first, Cam. I mean, back-to-back days here in the SRO Esports ROG Arena. How much fun have you had?
Oh my gosh, this has been an absolute blast. I can't thank, SRO Esports, everyone from Fanatag, AK Esports, everyone that's been out here, especially Sam, Ken, Nina, Cyrus, Omri, everyone that's out there right now putting in hard work in the 8 hour. This has been an absolutely incredible experience. I'm super grateful. Congratulations to Gregor and Chris. They drove phenomenally. And, this has been a surreal event, so thank you guys.
We'll go over to Chris quickly as well. Chris, when it comes to you, I mean, I jokingly gave you the second place trophy yesterday, and I felt very bad. Second place for Ferrari Velis Esports as well, but you have got a lot of momentum, my friend. You are definitely on the top of your sim racing game.
Well, I think at this rate, I'm probably going to get used to getting second place and things. But, I think it's clear that I know that I still got a little bit of ways, to go. Maybe I got to, stop having a day job and start just grinding 8 hours a day.
It's something I think we all want. Let's head over to our winner then, Gregor Schill. I mean, Gregor, you came here from Germany. Was this the expectation?
Yeah, I mean, it was expected a bit, but it was still hard. Like, Chris' pace was amazing, and it was so close. I mean, you see it in quality, right? Even in the practice sessions, like, we were always like thousands apart. So I think it was more about, doing less mistakes and raw pace. So it was really hard to be also consistent on the rig, which we are not used to. So yeah, at the end it was maybe a bit more mistakes from Chris, but he still drove a phenomenal race. I mean, even at the end, like, my tires were gone, and I saw like the delta 3 times every lap he was catching. I was like, fuck, I don't need to mess up, and at the end it worked out. So yeah.
We apologize for the language from Mr. Schill there. Let's talk quickly about 2 weeks from today, the final round of the 2022 Mobileye Intercontinental GT Challenge SRO Esports. What's your expectations going into the 24 hours of Spa, sitting second in the championship?
Yeah, as you said, we are now on P2, 15 points behind the McLaren Veloce team, and yeah, unfortunately, BOP-wise, the M4 struggles a bit at Spa, so 15 points to gain on the other team will be hard, but we try our best. 24 hours is a long race, a lot can happen, so we'll see after 24 hours who will be then the champion.
Well, BOP complaints have already started. Going to be very, very exciting. We'll get all the drivers up here so we can celebrate what we've just had. Austin and myself will have a quick chat as well as we get ready to wrap things up. But Austin, I mean, we've had so much fun sitting behind the scenes, just talking about all the racing. How do you reflect on this ROG Arena landing here at IMS?
I think this was a fantastic opportunity to really showcase the opportunity, you know, that the sim drivers have. This was a fantastic race. It was also awesome to see all the different cars out there on track. Yesterday, it was kind of a stunted field. We only had 3 different manufacturers out there, but today you really got to see the ins and outs of all the different cars, how they all handled, and really talking to all these drivers, what that was going to be like as the race went on. We saw some, you know, Ed Kerstetter, for instance, you know, he had a really good car in the beginning, fell off in the middle, and then was really fast again, but just wore out that rear axle a little bit too much. And how about the run that Gregor Schill had? That was just amazing from start to finish.
SRO Esports has landed in America, and it has been a blast. Who knows what 2023 will hold in store for us, but don't forget, 2 weeks from today, the final round of the Mobileye 2022 Intercontinental GT Challenge SRO Esports live on GT World will be there for all the actions. Congratulations, not just to Gregor Schill, but Devin Anderson, winners here in the SRO ROG Invitational, live from this ROG arena. We'll see you next time. For now, goodbye.